All right, so let's continue our exploration of muscles, and now we're going to do the muscles of the arm. And so let's start with an easy one that most people are familiar with, and that is the biceps brachii. So let's break down that word a little bit. Biceps, bi means two, ceps means heads, plural. The reason I'm emphasizing that is because the correct spelling is biceps. Let's give that a check mark. But many people say or write bicep, which is just one, wrong, or bicept, which is also wrong. So also, I just want to advise my students and anybody who might be here from the internet, the more times you say the name of a term incorrectly, the more likely you are to memorize it incorrectly and to write it incorrectly on a test. So you'll hear me occasionally verbally correct myself when I stumble or misspeak because it happens, we're human. But I like to verbally correct myself wherever possible because, again, I don't want to, reinforce or consolidate a memory that's incorrect. I don't have to worry about that as much because I'm not learning this for the first time, but you guys are. And so just when you say the wrong thing, if you know that you did, verbally correct yourself out loud. It's not embarrassing, it's part of learning. You're gonna, misspeak sometimes, and that's okay, but if you aren't careful about that, it can land you in hot water and you lose points. So I don't want that to happen to you. All right, so biceps means two heads. So the long head is lateral and the short head is medial. My students don't have to know the difference between the two. You just have to recognize it as being the biceps brachii. So it's also really important to say brachii because there's also, of course, a biceps femoris down below in the leg. So you must specify. So biceps brachii means the muscle with two heads of the upper arm or brachium. So that's critical info. So let's go laterally. If you go laterally and underneath the long head of the biceps brachii, you will find the brachialis. And so let's go ahead and isolate the brachialis. So we see it occupies basically the distal half of the humerus on the anterior side, and it comes on over and inserts on the coronoid process of the ulna, which you might remember from Bones lab, right? And so when this gets shorter, it's going to pull the ulna, let's turn that around, pull the ulna in this direction, right? So it's going to be one of your elbow flexors. So brachialis, and let's also subtract some muscles just so we can kind of, oh no, I don't get the option to do that. I can just do this or this. That's a little bit of a bummer. So let's fade the others just so you can see where it sits. So it's underneath the biceps brachii there. All right, so let's turn this back over and around to look at the triceps brachii. So it's got three heads, the lateral, the long, and then underneath these is the medial head. So it's both underneath and medial. So that's why I'm just showing you, that's how it has three. So triceps brachii is on the back. So if this gets shorter, it's going to extend your arm and your elbow joint. So it's basically the opposite, especially the medial head, the opposite of the brachialis. So it inserts on the olecranon of the ulna, and that's going to pull the ulna into an elbow straight position. All right, so let's move down. Oops. Okay, so now we get to the situation with the forearm that students find confusing, and I understand why, because there's a lot of stringy stuff down here. So we're going to do the anterior forearm first and the posterior forearm second. So the brachialis also pokes out right there, and then running from the medial aspect to the lateral is the pronator teres. It's not on your list, but if you go in from that, we've got our flexor carpi radialis. So it appears to go central, but if we isolate it, we can see that it's going to flex the metacarpal. So this is involved in pulling your hand into a flexed position. And then if we add it back there, we can see that it goes under the palmar aponeurosis, which is that little triangle thingy there. And then next to that, we've got the palmaris longus, which is very nice. And then if I twirl this a little bit, we've got the flexor carpi ulnaris. So again, if we isolate this little guy, it's going to insert on the carpals, but also the base of MT5. So specifically the pisiform and the hook of the hamate, but you don't have to know those specifics. You just have to know that it's the flexor carpi ulnaris. I just like to show you the isolation view so you can get a better idea of what exactly the muscle is going to do if it gets shorter. So flexor carpi ulnaris. All right, so if we go around here, and a little bit to the back, and add some more muscles back, we can see some additional stuff, including our little friend here, the brachioradialis. So this is called that because it goes from the brachium to the radius. So it's brachioradialis. It's probably the most obvious and largest of the forearm flexors. And then we have the flexor carpi radialis again, the palmaris longus, and underneath of that, let's subtract a couple muscles. Nope, not veins. We have the flexor digitorum superficialis. You can see this goes all the way to your phalanges. This is going to help you close your hand and fist. So that's what that is doing. So let's go ahead and add all of our muscles back. There we go. So you can see that the flexor digitorum superficialis is underneath our flexor carpi radialis and our palmaris longus, and medially our flexor carpi ulnaris. So it's called the flexor digitorum superficialis, even though it's deep to those muscles, because even deeper underneath the flexor digitorum superficialis is a flexor digitorum profundus, but that's not on your list. So let's go ahead and flip and add some stuff back. There we go. And we'll see the back of the arm. So you can see the flexor carpi ulnaris from the back here. And then next to that is the extensor carpi ulnaris. And if you're like, wow, they're right next to each other, how do they do opposite things? The extensor carpi ulnaris attaches to the back of MT5, and the flexor carpi ulnaris attaches to the front. So even though they're next to each other, because they're attached to different aspects or faces of the hand, this is a flexor and this is the extensor. And then we of course have the extensor digitorum, extending the digits. So it's going to extend your phalanges and your hand. And then we've got the extensor carpi radialis longus, and underneath that, the extensor underneath that, not the brachioradialis. I think I have to subtract some stuff. There we go. So longus is there. And the brevis is underneath. And this is interesting. So it goes down to the posterior or dorsum of the hand. So it's going to extend the hand. So I don't love the way this is in the model because it doesn't really look like our cadavers. The The brevis is a lot easier to see in real life. It's not sort of buried as much like it is here, but it is what it is. So longus on the top, and then brevis underneath. Okay, so that's those muscles, and then we need to look at the muscles of the thumb. So the reason I was a little bit grousing about the way this looks is because here we have the abductor pollicis longus and the extensor pollicis brevis, but in the cadavers, the belly portion here wraps around the extensor carpi radialis longus and brevis, and it looks really nice. It looks almost like it's cool and it's obvious. It looks almost sort of like they're doing this kind of thing. And they didn't really illustrate that here. They made them straight, which is a weird choice, but whatever. So we're going to look at the brevis, so longus, laterally, brevis, medially and underneath. And the next one is the abductor pollicis longus. So abduction of the fingers or the thumb means moving your thumb away from your hand. And then adduction of the thumb is moving it towards. So abductor pollicis longus, if you make the muscle shorter, let's take away some layers there. There we go. We can see that it goes to the base of the thumb at the proximal, or excuse me, no, not the proximal, at the base of MT1. And it attaches superiorly. Let's take some more muscles away on the opposite side to the ulna. So basically it's going to pull the thumb away from the hand. So if you're thinking, why would it pull away? Why wouldn't it pull towards? What you'll notice is that if this gets shorter, it's going to pull the base of MT1 that way. So that is going to be your abductor pollicis longus. So we can see these other tendons here going to the thumb. So next to it is the extensor pollicis brevis. So that's going to extend the thumb, so move it up. So if you're holding your hand, if you hold your arm out and your palm is facing down and you move your thumb upward from the plane of your hand, that's extending your thumb. So that's what that guy does, just pulls your thumb up. And then finally, we've got the extensor pollicis longus, which is underneath the extensor digitorum, and that is going to extend your thumb, and it's long. So abductor, extensor, extensor, longus, brevis, longus, from lateral to medial, if that makes sense. So you can kind of help yourself by memorizing, because they're words that sound similar, right? So if you memorize, okay, they're all about the thumb, so they're all going to include pollicis, and it goes from lateral to medial, longus, brevis, longus, and then you also memorize lateral to medial, abductor, extensor, extensor. Then all you have to do is plug in pollicis and you're good to go. And you can also make sure that you're looking at where the tendons are going as well. And then the extensor indicis is a fun one. It's just for pointing your finger, your index finger. So that's going to be underneath, if we add it back, the extensor digitorum. And I believe that is all we've got for our muscle list. Interesting, do they not show the anconeus? Oh no, there it is. So I'm going to end this video and get it posted, and then we'll come back and look at the muscles of the face and the pectoral muscles and trunk, and then we'll sort of conclude the muscles that we've got. So this is exciting. We're almost done with muscles. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for your attention.